Hey guys, Jama here. I just wanted to make a quick overview of texture work that we did on this pack. So basically you have like three main files, and I would say like not files, types of files. You have kits, it's basically what you see here. Obviously if you're using Blender you already have this all set up for you. If you're using some other software you have FBXs that are also like separated in kits, assemblies, and then you have hero mechs. So let's start from this one because this is sort of where we really wanted to nail the usability and sort of make everything super practical for like artists. And doesn't matter what software you use, it like me myself working in industry, every time I open these files I want everything to be super clear and super handy as well, so we try to do our best to retain that sort of logic. So anyway, let's jump into it. So basically what we have here, we have the pack here, and obviously the pack is divided in the categories here. So you have limbs, you have engines, you have like a device, his pipes and all that stuff's all super clear, it's all visual. Again, if you're not using Blender, it's all like sorted out and separated in folders, so you know exactly what kits you want to use. The major stuff I want to talk about here would be texturing, because we spent so much time trying to find this golden sort of mean and make sure everything is super detailed but also like easy to use. And one of the biggest things we introduced, obviously let's just go through this stuff and then I will show you what I really wanted to show you. Basically we have, as you see here, we have kits, but also we have all the spheres here. Why do we have this? So all the kits you're seeing here are basically like UV'd and hand painted, and they have textures just purely for this. Obviously we don't have textures per each object. I think overall we have like 18 or so textures, so a lot of these objects they share a single texture, which is also super handy. So let's say if you want to adjust a group of objects, you don't need to adjust every single texture, because there's one texture that, for example, tires, it's just all, they are all on one texture. And also as you can see in the folders, we separated our textures into three sort of resolution types. You have 4K, which is the maximum one, and then you have 2K, and then you have 1K textures. It's also super handy because let's say you want to have 10 mechs in your scene. Obviously you don't want them to be super detailed, but you want one of them to be super detailed. So one of them you can use 4K textures and the rest could be just 1K. I mean, textures is something that really sort of slows down your machine because it occupies a lot of memory. Anyway, so these are UV objects, which means like, let's say if you want this texture on a different object, it wouldn't work because it just belongs to this object. And that's why we made this texture. So the reason why we made this textures, because no matter how many model kits we have here, and we have tons of different things, you still would love to have some custom geometry. Like let's say you created a leg or arm of a mech or a vehicle, then you have like custom plating that you want to introduce, which is obviously not here. It would be something that you would be creating. Like let's say let's create like a very simple version of it, right? Let's say there's like a detail that you're working on and you want it to look like this, right, for example. And then you put in like smooth modifier or another one, so that's the custom detail you have. Again, this is a very cheap like job I did here, but you will have something much more beautiful, I'm pretty sure. And then you sort of want this to match it to whatever text you're using here. Obviously you can make it just green and metallic, but we wanted this to look like much better, so you have all this selection here. And again, color is something that you can tweak easily, but what is the most important is the roughness and the sort of metallic look of it. So for now I'll just go and, like, for example, link this to, I press Ctrl L and then link materials, right? Boom. And now I have this. Obviously if you make smooth modifier, and then you can adjust tiling, but at least now it looks like it could belong to, I mean, color wise it's slightly off, but it doesn't matter. At least it has all this sort of like that texture quality in it, you know. And we have like tons of different options. You have like grilled, like let's say you created a custom floor like pattern, like flooring in your mech or in your vehicle, you can use this texture or this one. We have a nice variety here, so, and you can pretty much use any of it. But the next part, actually, this is where I do believe we did a fantastic job on introducing that. So let's say you assemble a mech or something, right? Because there's so many different parts and they have so many different textures. well, we have only 18 textures, but this is still a lot, right? What about if like you want to change appearance of your mech? So the default one we have is this sort of military, what do you call it? What do we call it? Like military sort of green color. However, let's say you want to make something that looks like a desert vehicle, right? Or like a snowy sort of camouflage or something like that. Instead of like, imagine if you assemble a mech and you will have to manually change every texture. Oh my god, that will take a lot of time. So what we did basically, I'll show you. It's all set up for you. You can go to, let's open like shader editor here. Yeah. And let's have a look at shader editor here. So shader editor here is pretty straightforward. You've got normal, you've got roughness, you've got metallicness set up, but this is the one that we made very custom. So we painted these masks. So what the masks do, and this is exactly where you don't need to be a Blender user to be able to use it. You can do this in any software. You can do this in Octane, Redshift, as a renderer, right? Arnold, any software will handle this. So what those masks do, they basically, we painted them in a way they only affect areas with color. So they wouldn't, so it's not just like a generic tint shift that we would love to do to color correct those. It's actually like a proper sort of masked coloring that we will be doing. So the areas that have these metallic surfaces, they would be not touched by our color adjustments. And actually, let's jump into it and actually show how it actually works. So we're using these masks and we're using this node color called color, and this is a universal node connected to all of the textures. So we have 18 materials, and look, whenever I click on any, look, this material obviously is a different material from this one, but it still has this color node. And again, this is something you can replicate in Octane. I had never used Redshift, but I'm pretty sure you can use it in Redshift. It's basically a node that like a universal node that you're using to control all of the materials in your scene. And why would you do that? Again, once you assemble your mech, you would want to have a full control on overall geometry, not just on like one single piece, right? So, and then again, over here, if I expand this node system for you, okay, the nodes are very simple here actually. So what do we have here? We have 3 groups here, and I will explain them as we go. By default, what we have here is that we have only color adjustment activated. So you can see like the output goes out from this brightness and contrast node, and it goes to output. So which basically means like whenever you tweak these guys over here, you will adjust the sort of the hue and saturation and color and brightness of the existing texture. So if visually we would love to check how it looks like, it's pretty simple. So over here, you see, like I'm dialing this sort of feature here, and you see I'm changing the hue. And look how it affects everything. It affects every single piece here, apart from the masked out areas. So you see I'm not tinting the emissive materials. Remember I told you we have a separate mask controlling all that stuff. And look, all the metallic parts are also not affected, just purely because we're not having any paint on them. So whenever you have some paint work on your kits, you will be able to adjust them, right? And then again, it's really up to you. Depends on what you're working on. Let's say you're working on something where you need like sort of muted palette, right? Or like darker values. You can really fine tune all these guys, and it works fantastically, especially like right now. Imagine if we hadn't done this, right, for you. Then you will have to do this on this, and every single piece is, like texture. We have 18 of them, but it's still a lot, right? And imagine if you adjusted one of them and you didn't like it, you have to readjust all of them, and it's just really, really painful. Doing it this way, making it be controlled by one color node, allows you to really purely think about design of the things, not to think about how I'm gonna unify the textures and all that stuff. So yeah, and again, have a play with it. Like you can like change the contrast. Let's say you want like more like sci-fi-ish looking black sort of metal, you can totally do that. Or you can tweak the brightness if you can, like if you want some areas to be brighter and all this stuff. I mean, just these two nodes, they could do magic. But we also have this color ramp, which is affecting the mask itself. I believe, like if you, for example, make this black and then start playing with this gradient, yeah, you can see you sort of color correcting the mask, right? And again, it's very subtle, but it's still like you can see, like when you color correct it, you start seeing some of that greenish color that we had initially. So this is where you can blend nicely. Yeah, you can, like, it's very subtle, but if you zoom in over here, let's say, yeah, over here, like you can totally see how you start seeing through some of that greenish initial color. And again, for non-Blender users, right, we remember you guys, we have these masks as a separate sort of JPEGs, so you can go and set this up in your render or whatever you're using. Oh, I'm an Octane user. I've done this in Octane. It's super straightforward. Pretty sure you can do that in Redshift, V-Ray, Mental Ray, Arnold, and you count, right? So, and the way it looks like, again, it's very simple. It's just a mask, so you can find any of these masks. And yeah, again, they're hand painted to exclude the metal elements, and that allows you to tweak the colors as you want. But let's go back to our shader editor, and there is, even without a color adjustment node, there is one node that by default is not connected to the output. The reason why we did it, because this one sort of, just these two nodes allow you to tweak the colors. But I would say this is just color correcting them. But if you like want to overlay, let's say you're working on some sort of a construction robot, right? You want to have like really bright sort of orangey sort of color, right? Instead of trying to find that over here, you can also overlay this color. And let's say if I do this now, nothing happens, right? The reason why nothing is happening, because I need to connect. You see right now it's connected over here. You can just directly go ahead and connect it to color. Boom. And once you do that, yeah, then you have full-on control. Look, now it looks dramatically different, right? It's not just shifting the hue of your object, but you're actually shifting, yeah, you overlaying this color, and it just works fantastically. And again, this one has a separate mask control, because unlike the hue, you can also control this paint. Imagine this was a military like mech that was later on utilized and converted into something like a civil vehicle, right? And then you have much like sort of brighter colors and stuff like that, but you still see some of that paint poking through, right? On this object, actually you don't see much of that, but over here, look, it's amazing. Actually, this one is probably, because it had only green elements and not much of that metallic color. But you can see what you can end up having. It's just fantastic. Look, this is looking like damaged stuff. And this looks like less damaged, more like painted stuff. Yeah, and you can go and tweak those things. And again, I also think like you can do this. Yeah, like you can control how much of that you want and stuff like that. Yeah, look at this. You can basically do. And again, like let's say a sort of a situation where you want this to be like this, but you also want this to be damaged. Then you just need to disconnect this. You can click on this and make sure, and basically have another node. You see this node right now controls 12 textures, but you can disconnect that node and like create custom sort of, not, it will be a separate material basically, and you can tweak this. So this one could have this color ramp, and this one could have slightly different color ramps. You still will be able to separate materials from each other. It's just a matter of like going here and clicking on this number, and then this material will have this color node belonging only to this part or whatever. So yeah, let's go back inside, and again the color node here does that, and again you can have like really bright mechs if you're working on something fancy, or you can have like greenish, like yellowish. You count, right? Like, and again, like you can control how bright the color is. Let's say you're making some sort of marine naval version of a mech. Just adjusting that. And again, as a person who, like, as a team who made this, I'm always proud of what we did, but every time I do this I'm so excited because look how this non-metallic areas are affected and metallic ones still stay intact. If this was a simple hue saturation sort of adjustment, you'll have metal picking up weird colors, and that's not exactly what. Look at the cables still stay like the black color that we wanted them to be. And again, on these monitors here you can also see like all the emissive materials and stuff. It's not affected. Look, I can prove that to you again. If we go back to hue, and again, you can always go back, like you don't necessarily always need to do it here. You can always go back and start adjusting things here. But yeah, when you overlay colors, you basically, this overlay sort of is more dominant than the color correction here. So yeah, if you want to, and look how everything is changed. If you want to tweak things, you can do it by just selecting a color. Okay, so now let's have a look how actually this works perfectly on much more complex shapes. So as you know, we have assemblies, which is basically like we took and designed some complete elements, right, made out of those model kits that you have in a bigger file. And again, all of this stuff is made out of like, this is something else, this is like, is taking, and we basically spend time really putting them together so it kind of makes sense. So there's a wheel suspension system and the wheel. In the kit, everything comes separately and you can put it all together yourself. However, we felt like sometimes you don't even have time for that. You would want to have some pre-made assemblies. So this is what this assembly stuff is about. Like you have legs and limbs and arms and stuff like that. And this is where exactly that node system that we have works perfectly, because look, we have all these elements and they belong to different materials, right? They have, as I mentioned, we have 18 materials, and some of them are using one of them and the other one uses another one. And when you put them together, you want them to sort of be unified. Obviously, when you have a default shader, they look unified. However, let's say I want to make them of a different color, and this is exactly where this color node comes very handy, because you can go and basically make those adjustments that I showed you before. Again, let's just hook up this one to our output here, and now basically like I can go and tweak this sort of color. Let's make it sort of orangey, brighter color, and as you see, all of those are now having that color. But now you can see here we have this camouflage. So what is this about? So this is a cool feature that we thought of, is basically doing the same thing. This is something that we're trying to introduce to unify all the assets. For example, let's have a look at this leg here, right? As you see, we introduced a little bit of this brownish color, and now, like, let me find these nodes again, open the color node, and now actually let's go and hook up, like, connect the camouflage node. So instead of, right now it's connected to this mixed one, to the color adjustment nodes. Now we're gonna go and connect it from here, right? So once we do that, look, it will retain the color, but also now it's connecting this camouflage nodes that we have here. And basically what they do, we are using procedural noise to mask out certain areas and to shift, like, to tint the color of those areas. And it works really nicely because that allows you, for example, look, over here it became darker. I mean, it doesn't only work for camouflage, it could work for some dirt elements, but again, it's something that we're introducing to unify those. Like, look how this darker spot over here goes across different materials, basically, like all the separate parts here. Not all of them, but some of them have different materials on them, and being able to control, to have this overall tint shift in some areas allows us to unify those. You can clearly see it over here. Look at this camouflage here. Obviously, like, let's make it something a little bit like more like a deserty sort of thing. So I would say we go like this, we do that, and maybe we can drop the saturation a little bit. Again, this node overrides the saturation, so I think I have to do it over here. Yeah, look, so now it looks more like, I don't know, like a desert vehicle, isn't it? And now here it's pretty straightforward. What do you have here? You have the size of it, so you can go like full-on camouflage mode, which is super handy as well, or you can go like with the bigger values and just introduce this sort of bigger spots. It depends on the size of your vehicle and what your vehicle is about. Let's say if you made a rifle, like a sniper rifle, you would probably want something like this, right? It's almost like it's covered by leaves or something like that. But again, if this is a tank or something like that, it really depends. Like, have a look at military vehicles, you see all sorts of variety, and being able to tweak them like this is just fantastic. So I'm gonna go with the bigger one. Then over here, obviously, you can control the noise. Also, you can control scale here as well. But for some reason, I think like controlling it from mapping is much more intuitive. And also, you can control the detail. Sort of, you can go and make it more detailed. Obviously, this one looks more like clouds, isn't it? So apparently, like, it works better with lower values. But it also really up to you. Like, all these elements, you have to tweak it just to see, like, you can have even distorted one. Obviously, I mean, this looks more like a military camouflage on characters you would have. But again, it's really up to you. It's super creative. Like, it pretty much depends on what look you're going after. So this camouflage node does that. And over here, basically, we have also this sort of color ramp that controls the contrast of that noise. So if you want like a very crisp line for your camouflage, you do this. If you want something a bit more subtle, a bit more soft painted, right? Soft brush painted, you can control it over here. And you can over here basically control how much it affects, right? So this does that. And as a final thing, so far this camouflage node over here controls the mask itself, isn't it? But what controls the color is this node over here. So for example, let's say you have like this desert sort of camouflage, right? And then over here you can make some of the parts darker. Let's like saturate them and shift it to make it more like this, right? Let's say for some reason you wanted that, you can totally do that. And again, this is really up to you guys. What depends on what you're working on, what type of mech you're doing. But we felt this is just a perfect example and a great solution to unify your model kits, right? Because again, a lot of this realism and cool look comes from textures. Yes, we did a fantastic, and Min did a fantastic job designing this, and we did a fantastic job like putting this together. But the textures here is what makes it really shine, you know. And ability like to tweak it as you go. Like, look, you can come up with like crazy camouflage sort of ideas, and it's really, everything is really made just by controlling those nodes, right? Like, for example, you can always go back and sort of like tweak this one or make it like this and stuff. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and again, no matter how complex your mech is, which we will be looking at just in a second, but you can make like a giant vehicle or a small one. No matter what mech you are doing, this colored node is what will unify everything and make it look like it's a one complete object rather than a collection of separate model kits. Okay, so let's sum it all up on this final example here. As you can see, like, originally we designed this mech Sandstorm, which I thought would be like really nice to have in a deserty environment, but it doesn't mean it has to be. Like, for example, let's say I have this nice Mech Scan snow texture here, and as you can see, my mech is so different, and if we hadn't done all this texture setup, you will have to manually tweak the textures, which is obviously not the convenient way to do it. And I always say, like, I would love to focus on design of things, not like tweaking technical stuff. So we did all the homework for you. All you guys need is just to come up with these cool designs, and the texture is already sorted out for you. And let's just quickly go back to our shader editor. Again, the same process. I would pick up any part. It doesn't necessarily need to be a wheel, it could be anything, right? And because all of them have the same color node, correction node, you just expand that. And in this one, we already have everything connected. All we need to do is just to make it look like it could exist in this snow environment, right? Like I would say then we probably will have some cooler colors, even a lot of grays and stuff like that. So probably even like just tweaking, making it like grayish, and then shifting it a little bit into like sort of like cooler color would be enough. This is already looking pretty solid. I would say we can probably tweak these masks a little bit so we're not seeing a lot of that orangey. But again, the reason why we have this color ramp mask, because you don't always need to be monochromatic. That's the beauty of having this mechanical part. They always have these rusty elements and some like chipped off metal areas. So you can overall, like if I zoom out, it already fits this environment, but actually having these little oranges makes it even better, because then they look like it's a, what do you call it, sort of rust elements and all that stuff. So then we can go and tweak the saturation a little bit, make it less saturated, and then once we do that, we obviously need to make this color overlay less saturated. So I'm gonna tone it down. Yeah, this is actually perfect. Just using those two nodes. Imagine if we don't have this. It's a lot of like work, right? And again, we don't have obviously right now this setup works perfectly in Blender. It works exactly like this in Unreal as well, but obviously we don't have setups for Cinema 4D, Maya, and all that stuff. All that stuff is coming. We're working on that. However, at least understanding the principle behind it really will help you to set up your system in your software of your choice, right? Again, as long as you have mask, you should be able to do a lot of those things. This is actually pretty close, isn't it? Like maybe I can go ahead and tweak the saturation of my camouflage, maybe make it slightly darker if I want to be, maybe not. You can either make it darker or brighter. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve here. But I like it because look what I'm doing. Basically, I'm looking at the back at the ground, and look, it's white elements against some dark elements. So maybe even like going back to our brightness node, shall we add a little bit of brightness and make some areas brighter? Again, they don't need to be whitish, but and then introduce a little bit of contrast like this. Yeah, I'm very happy because like if I zoom out, it actually looks like this belongs to this world, right? And then there is another element that I actually really like, and we have this additional node that we haven't talked about, which is dust node. What this dust node does, it basically allows you to introduce this layer of stuff on top of your vehicles or your mechs, right? Again, it's a very simple setup. We're using normal map here, but basically what it does, it allows me to, for example, just change this color. Let's say I can color pick, and boom, look, straight away we have this almost like snow covering the whole thing, right? And over here we can control how much we want it to be. We can like make it fully covered with snow if it's a heavy snow, right? I will have it less covered with snow. Again, it's a fake sort of effect because you can see it also does it inside, which you probably don't want to have. But again, it's something that you can tweak, you know, you can always go and say like, I don't want it to be in some areas. The way you do it, again, let me actually show it to you. So for example, this dust node, which is in our case is a snow node, right? Works perfect for like this exterior elements, right? Like we can go even like cover them heavier, right? Like works perfectly. But then you have it inside, which obviously doesn't have any logic. Like how would you have snow inside unless it's like abandoned thing, right? Then what you do, you select this object, you disconnect it first. So you click here. So now it's a complete standalone material. And now we got to disconnect this color node as well. So we're gonna go and click on this. Yeah, and you can name it, like for example, color seed, right? So you know exactly which material is applied to this piece here. And then you go inside, and then obviously you either disconnect completely this dust node, or you can just basically knock it back, right? Like completely, like do something like this. And now we don't have any, oh, we still actually have some snow. Yeah, again, it's probably what we gotta do. We just need to make it black like this. Or completely disconnect it and just drop it from here. Yeah. And look how amazing this is, because this allows you to really like fine tune it. Look, there's a massive difference here, isn't it? Like, because now we went from a sand sort of deserty color scheme, and now we have a very nicely integrated object. And again, with our model kits, you can keep adding, right? Like all you need to do, let's say if you wanted some additional part to be added to this, you just need to replace that color node. So all you gotta do, like, let's say if you imported this element, a different element here, all you need to do is just copy paste this node to a new details or new pieces that you're adding on top of that, and it will have the same look. Which I think, like personally, this is a fantastic, phenomenal way to purely concentrate on design and storytelling, rather than thinking, oh, now I have to texture paint this guy. Again, it's not fully integrated in terms of obviously the way objects transition into each other. However, because the texture spreads over everything, the camouflage helps to blend those areas, you know, and it looks like it's a single object that was made from one material, rather than an object made of different materials and then put together, which it is. But the color node we introduced and the dust node and the camouflage really allows you to bring it all together. And at any point, like, again, the reason why I love this setup so much, at any point, let's say you want this to be less, like, this looks more like a military vehicle. Obviously you have a gun, right? But let's say we delete the gun and we go, maybe this is some sort of a research vehicle, like the ones that you have in Antarctica or somewhere, like in the snowy sort of really cold areas. You would want it to be bright because you want people to see it from far away. And then, for example, I can go inside. We can still leave the dust. The snow will stay there. But instead of having this muted cool color, we can go and introduce like really crazy orangey color. Right. This is obviously, again, we can tweak it over here. And then saturation, make it 1. Brightness, because it goes through like this multiple nodes. Yeah, like if you want this node like affect this directly, you have to zero this out. By zeroing out, I mean like just defaulting them, and obviously 1 is the default value here. Yeah, and now you can like just pick up like some really nice orangey, the scientific sort of color, and again it's super bright. And then can adjust bright. With this brightness, you need to be very careful because you don't want tires to be white, isn't it? So we can do that, and add a little bit of contrast. And now we can, for example, go, obviously this red color is not exactly what I want. You either completely unplug it if you don't want any camouflage, or if you just want to have a very subtle sort of variation, I can just go like this, and maybe, yeah, we can slightly change the tint or something like that. It could be very, very subtle. It doesn't necessarily need to be a camouflage. It could be, I don't know, some areas are like a little bit less, the paint sort of darkened out, became like less bright, and that really helps. And look, all of a sudden I have a completely different feeling here, isn't it? Before it was definitely military vehicle, but now it's more of like a scientific sort of science vessel or something like that. Anyway, so that's pretty much sums it up. Guys, feel free to experiment with these nodes. But I do believe this setup allows you to completely forget about the textures, purely first design your objects, right? Like you first come up with these ideas and shapes and all that stuff. And then once you go into material preview, there is no limit. You can literally in 2 clicks make it, you can go from a military vehicle to a science vessel. So it's all about colors. And again, I did this all randomly. The best way to do this is to look at real world examples, right? You look at like military tanks, and then you can match the color scheme, or you look at like science vessels, and then you can match a color, or you look at construction sort of vehicles, and then you can match the colors, as long as you have some reference. But then again, sometimes you can go crazy, like, and do some weird colors if you're just working on something like less realistic and stuff like that. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, guys, and that's it.